All right, I'm here in Toronto, and today I just finished up 2 additional training sessions. I did 2 yesterday for student athletes and staff. A lot of what we talked about is LGBTQ inclusion in sport, creating safer, more inclusive spaces for athletes, coaches, and fans. I was doing these trainings through You Can Play. What I want to talk about right now is a few tips for allies of transgender people in sports. And so I have 5 tips that I think are super helpful for people who are just getting started with this. Just some concepts for you to think about and try to work through. And also, I think this is a good starting point if you have no experience with the inclusion of transgender athletes in sport. So, tip number 1 is respect. This is a pretty basic concept, but I think it's super important to just start at the ground level. Respect. So what does that mean? Respect the trans person's name and their pronouns. In all interactions, you should address them by the name that they say they go by and by their pronouns that they use. Respect their privacy by not outing them to other people. Now, this is super important. If you have somebody who confides in you, who trusts you enough to share their identity with you, please respect their trust. Not everyone is ready to be out to an entire team or to an entire group of people. So you might be the trusted one that somebody brings into their experience. It's important to be respectful of that. Number 2, going along with that, is confidentiality. So protect the privacy of transgender people in sports. It needs to be a top priority for athletes who are teammates, for coaches, and for anybody who's working in the sports field of even athletic trainers, media professionals, athletic department, and affiliated school personnel, particularly in the presence of the media. And so all of this should be treated as confidential medical information. Just as you wouldn't disclose if somebody has a medical condition, and I'm not trying to conflate or put together medical condition as a transgender identity, but it's the same concept in terms of confidentiality. This is a student's individual information, and they need to be in control of how they disclose that and who they talk to. So it's the responsibility of a coach, it's the responsibility of, say, an athletic director who knows to help move this process along, to help this student feel comfortable in the situation, but it's not their responsibility to disclose specific information about one student. What this means is that if you have a trans athlete who is traveling to another school and needs a separate locker room to change in for their own comfort, that you don't disclose which student it is, you just make the request for an additional changing space. So, number 3, which maybe should be higher on the list, is support. And so the best thing that you can do as an ally to a transgender athlete or transgender person is to listen and support. And this can just mean by listening and affirming that you hear what this person is saying, validating their experience. It can mean the world to somebody who's looking for that support, who is in need of that support. It can be a very scary situation to disclose one's identity, to bring other people into their lived experience, and having that acknowledgement of just, I have your back. Even if you don't know what to do, just to say, I'll be supportive of you, could mean the world to somebody. A big thing here in terms of supporting is to allow the trans person, the trans athlete, to be in control of their own story, to be in control of who they tell and how they say it and when that happens. Allowing the trans athlete to control their experience can be very helpful in making them feel comfortable on the team and in having control of their situation. Number 4, understand that every trans person's journey is different. There's not just one way to be transgender. There's not just one way to be a transgender athlete. And so while some people may do a medical transition, meaning they're taking hormones and need to switch teams, some people may make a social transition, which is just a change in name or pronouns or style of dress, haircut, how they accessed different facilities. So there's not just one way, and there's not a linear path. There's not a step-by-step guide for athletes or for any trans person to go through in order to identify as transgender. It's important to understand that every person's experience will be different. And while there might be some similarities, we all have different backgrounds, come from different parts of the country, different religious affiliations, parental influence, peer influence. All of these things add up to how we experience the world. And so understanding that our experiences may be different, people identify their gender in different ways. So they might have different terminology, different ways of identifying outside of transgender man or transgender woman, and they have a sexual orientation. And so trans people can be gay, lesbian, bisexual, queer, asexual, any other sexual orientation. They're all unique parts of a trans person's identity. Number 5, educate yourself. Challenge your own notions of gender roles and expectations. Use inclusive language. If you don't know what inclusive language is, do research. If there are any terms or concepts that you are unsure of, do your research. Now, does doing research mean calling on a trans person and asking them questions? In some cases it might, if you have that relationship with somebody, but understand that trans people are often in a position where they have to justify their own existence, that they have to spend time explaining why their identity is valid. So as much information as you could do on your own, I encourage you to do that. There are a variety of resources out there for you. In addition to regular resources from LGBTQ organizations and advocacy organizations, there are sport-specific resources out there for you as well. So as much research as you can do and not relying on the marginalized person to educate you on their identity, the better off you'll be as an ally. So go out, do some research, and then figure out how you can use that to be a better ally to the trans people in your life. Now, you might not have trans people in your life at this moment that you know of. You might not have out people in your life that you know of. But there are a lot of people in your experience, and statistically, you may know a transgender person or someone who is questioning their gender identity. So as much as we can use inclusive language and create spaces where people are free to be fully themselves, even if there are no trans people that you know in the room, the better off you'll be in creating spaces where everyone can show up as they are, fully and authentically, which then, statistics show, makes for better athletes, better teams, and better people in general. Better, healthier people in general. So it's on us as allies to trans athletes and transgender people to reach out, to be supportive, listen, to treat them with respect, to maintain confidentiality, and to educate ourselves in order to be better allies. Now, I say all that because even though I identify as trans, I want to be an ally to other transgender athletes. So I think it's important for, while I can advocate for the inclusion of transgender people in sport, it is so incredibly helpful to have cisgender people also talk about why it's important to create inclusive spaces so that trans athletes have access to sport, so that transgender people feel included in sport and in the world, and that we are creating spaces where everyone can show up, bring their full selves to the team, and contribute in ways that doesn't require them to hide parts of themselves. So those are a few tips for allies of transgender people. Hope you find it helpful. If you need more tips on how to be an ally to trans people, or more information from terminology to policy information specific to transgender athletes, check out transathlete.com, and I will see you next time.